And we turn to China now, where millions of people in Shanghai have been confined to their homes in order to control a growing outbreak of COVID-19. The financial hub has become a coronavirus hotspot in recent weeks. The citywide lockdown will be conducted in 2 phases. It's China's most extensive lockdown in 2 years. Let's get more now from Fabian Kretschmer. He's a correspondent for us in Beijing. Fabian, has this caught people by surprise?
Yeah, quite by surprise. I mean, to be clear, there were several rumors going on in the previous days that there could be a lockdown. However, they were all immediately denied by the local government. And then when yesterday evening they indeed announced a citywide lockdown, people were flooding the supermarkets, emptying the shelves, and a lot of panic reactions. And people are really worried in Shanghai. So, yeah, it was definitely a surprise.
And help us understand, how does this 2-phase lockdown work? What's going to happen in everyday life?
So the city was basically split into 2 different zones. Actually, by the natural border, there's a river flowing through Shanghai, and east of the river is the first lockdown zone. And 4 days later, there will be the west of the river going into lockdown. However, you have to keep in mind it's in total more than 26 million people in Shanghai, so it's probably the biggest lockdown in the whole world right now. And yeah, the lockdown is also really quite strict. So basically, previous lockdowns, they have been extended for several weeks. So I would question that after those 4 days, the people can really go into freedom. At least in previous lockdowns in Shanghai, there were always 48-hour lockdowns, and they were extended for another 48 hours and then another 48 hours. So those rules were really quite flexible. I think it always depends on whether they can stop the infection of the virus. There will be a lot of mass testing while people are sealed off and basically cannot go out.
And do we have any idea if this is likely to spell the end of Shanghai's zero COVID policy?
No, my interpretation is the opposite, because actually there were a lot of speculation going on whether the government would basically have a pilot project in Shanghai, living with the virus, coexistence of the virus, but they decided otherwise. I mean, the financial center of China, if that is put into lockdown, the economic cost is really very high, and that shows a commitment that they want to keep the zero COVID policy with a lot of efforts, a lot of costs. And probably one reason is that in autumn we have the 20th Party Congress, and until then I don't think that China is ready to risk opening up the country, and I think they are committed to keeping zero COVID, at least for now.
Okay, Fabian Kretschmer reporting for us there from Shanghai. Thanks so much.
The 9-day lockdown of Shanghai due to a coronavirus outbreak is already impacting the global economy. China is the largest importer of crude oil in the world, but prices for the fossil fuel have slipped amid concerns that demand will fall after manufacturing was put on hold in Shanghai. The price for crude oil dropped more than $5 a barrel at one point. Let's get more on this from Craig Earlham. He's a senior market analyst at Oanda. Thanks for joining us on the programme. I mean, why is this having such a global impact, this shutdown in Shanghai?
Well, I think as you've already alluded to, China is the largest importer of crude oil, so anything that potentially impacts that is going to have an impact on the price, especially at a time of such tight supply at this moment in time. There is a real imbalance between the amount of oil that's on the market and the amount of demand there is for that oil, which is why we're seeing prices well above $100, and something which creates more of a two-way trade in that sense is obviously having an impact. I think more broadly speaking as well, we've also seen the impact that these shutdowns in China can have in other areas of the global economy. We've seen, for example, a supply chain disruptions which are generated on the back of many of these lockdowns, which we've seen around the world, in particular with China. And Shanghai is so important to the country as well, such a busy economic zone, that this is obviously naturally leading to some temporary, at least, demand imbalances.
Yeah, it's not going to help with those supply chain issues at all, is it? But global oil prices have actually been climbing recently. It's causing problems. It's causing bills to rise. So could it be argued that a drop in demand from China is what the world needs?
I think, I think in the short term, that yes, especially with regards to these high oil prices. I think anything that sees demand start to drop around the world, really, it's not just China, but around the world, will ultimately bring the price down and make things more affordable, especially in the short term, given the longer term issues that we now have at hand, depending on how the rest of this crisis in Ukraine unfolds. But ultimately, it's a very short-term solution just talking about Chinese demand, because with a drop in Chinese demand comes a drop in production, and a drop in production creates further supply chain disruptions. So you're kind of giving with one hand and taking with the other. Prices drop in terms of oil, but then they potentially rise in terms of other commodities and other finished products that we buy around the world, as we've seen over the last 18 months.
OK, Craig Earlham from Oanda, thanks a lot for bringing us up to date on that.
Thank you.